Hello, everyone, and welcome to UELFG, where we find a party to share what they've learned from game making. I am your host, Tina, and today with me I have the two co founders and creative directors of the Ascent from Neon Giant with me today. Let's go ahead and go through and get our guests introduced for the day. Arcade, would you like to tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hey. My name is Arcade. I've been working in the so-called AAA industry for about 15 years. Have a background in level, but primarily game design. Have had the great fortune and opportunity to work on some pretty cool games. Actually had a stint with Epic as well many years ago now, but I was in North Carolina helping out on a game that turned into Fortnite, for example. Worked on Gears, worked on the new Wolfenstein games, but eventually, to steal some of Tor's story as well, we felt that it was time to do our own thing, which is Neon Giant, which then made the Ascent.
So, very, very cool. And then, Tor, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Yeah, I mean, what Arcade said basically, but art instead. So I come from the art side of things, and I also have this around 15 years of experience of the AAA industry, working on the exact same games that Arcade listed, including working at Epic. I did not work on Fortnite though. But yeah, I'm a co-creative director with Arcade now here at Neon Giant, but I'm focusing more on the art and tech side of things.
That's awesome. Very cool. I actually was not aware that both of you have been working together for everything, it sounds like. So that's a really cool detail.
Yeah, by
Only
by
the
by
things that the
chance.
Arcade mentioned. So we have done a bunch of things we didn't work on together, but they are not as cool as the things we did together because we are such a good team.
And that's where we saw the magic. No, but we actually met in university, and then it was always by chance that we would end up at the same studios. So we didn't seek each other out. There was friendship, sure, but it wasn't that we were gonna
Mhm.
go on this life adventure together.
It
But
was
the
just meant to
fact that
be.
we did end up in the same places at the same games is part of the reasons why we started Neon Giant, right? Because we saw that clearly, we have similar sensibilities in what we're trying to do and what we enjoy doing. So
Mhm.
that was a big fundamental of what made us dare to start the studio together. Because you don't want to do that blind with someone you don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that just sounds like fate to me, because then you're able to come together and make the incredible game that is The Ascent, which I am so excited to get into today. Before we jump in, would either one of you like to explain to the chat, just in case anyone isn't aware, what The Ascent is?
Tour would love to.
Arcade. I was gonna say I'm holding a controller here.
Okay, it's a top-down action shooter RPG set in a cyberpunk world where obviously something bad happens and it's up to the player to figure it out. It can be played single player or up to 4 players. Local, because we felt that couch co-op is still the best type of co-op, but local and online. It is on PlayStation, PC, and Xbox. It's cross-gen, all the things, and obviously made with Unreal Engine.
Very, very cool. I'm super excited to get in. I know that not only myself, but a lot of people in chat have been fans of the game for quite a while now. So I think we're all excited to get in there and learn a little bit more about what's going on behind the scenes. So, are
Sweet.
you all ready to hop in?
Yep.
Cool. All right, let's do it. Alrighty, we've got the game pulled up now. To kick us off, I did want to ask y'all, what was the inspiration behind this game in the first place? The first concepts, all that good starting stuff.
When we started out, like it was only me and Arcade essentially, so we didn't really have, for example, we didn't have concept art, we didn't have anything. We just started making stuff together,
Yeah.
and it came a lot from uh, our references were came from a lot of both movies, games. comic books. We just draw on like inspiration from all types of different like sci-fi and cyberpunk that we both like.
And also, I mean, Tor has, even before we started, he had a reputation for this type of art, right? So we should play to what I will say our strengths are, but what his strengths were or still are when it comes to art, right? So it needed to be something that we felt confident in. And also, we're both very pragmatic people, maybe sometimes to a fault, but we needed to make a game that we knew that we could finish, right? Because we didn't start with a team, so we didn't know what we would be able to do in a year or 2 years time, but we knew that at the very essence, the two of us can make a top-down shooter, PC only, Steam early access, right? We can get there. And then as we brought on more and more people, that everyone that came in brought something new to the studio, and then we could apply that bit to the game as well. So the game just grew for every individual that joined the team. So it really is the amalgamation of all people. So when we pitched this, even in the beginning, it was very difficult for us because publishers don't want to hear, "Oh, we don't know what the game is going to be."
We'll figure
that's
it
not
out.
Right.
the that's not,
Yeah,
yeah, we'll figure it. Trust us, we made games before.
it's gonna look good though. That's what we
Mm.
could say.
Yeah, absolutely. So walk us through a little bit. What are we looking at right now?
So this is the first kind of friendly hub of the game called Cluster 13, and this is where you do a lot of mission briefings, shop for new armor, weapons, and so on. And it was also one of the first areas that we built for the game, and quite intricate as well. Like we spent a lot of time iterating on it, because when we first built this, the game was a very different game. It was very um, the focus of the game shifted as we were making it. So we had to revisit this and add more and more layers of things that fit
Mm.
more with the game that it ended up being.
We also, as we made more environments, we also learned what works and doesn't, right? So the first one obviously comes off a bit different from the last one you built. So then we had to go back and just make it a bit more uniform. Because before starting to build the real game, the only thing we had was a demo we made, and that was for us to figure certain things out. But we also sent that demo we made to Epic and won the Unreal Dev Grant, which was a great stamp of approval for us from Epic, but also a very powerful tool for us when it came to finding investment and publishing. That we had someone who believed in the project, but we didn't want to take that demo uh, to become the game, really. So that bit that you can play in our demo, that's scrapped. But that is basically the only thing we ever threw away, because then we started making a game which is the game. So we
Mm-hmm.
just figured things out as we went. Very atypical.
Yeah. It seems like it ended up working out. How much would you say, if you had to put a percentage on it, how different do you feel the game ended up by the end of production as it did from its original concept?
Okay, let's make up a number. 50%.
I was gonna go way
No,
higher. I was gonna go way higher
okay.
because one thing, it didn't start out with any of the RPG-ness. It started out as a very flat shooter, and then
Mm.
Yeah,
as
mission
time
based
went on, we
top-down
noticed
shooter.
that. Sorry.
Mission based local co-op top-down
Hmm.
shooter essentially.
But so we really noticed that, like, dialogues and character in the world and the civilians and the layers of RPG, like that all, well, today it's obvious, but like that, it really made the game not only better, but it also took itself more seriously. Like it matured. I would say that it matured during development, and with that, came new expectations and new things we wanted to do.
Yeah. I think it even shifted a little bit. Like, so we went from making a very like, okay, we're gonna make a super simple top-down shooter, mission-based, and then we're like, oh, no, it's going more in the RPG direction, and then it was like, well, we're gonna have way more systems, and it's not gonna have the same amount of handcrafting and the same amount of focus on the narrative and the world building that we're gonna have, but instead focusing more on systems. But then the game pulled back in the other direction, which is like, let's focus more on the world building and civilians. So it really went like a little bit like this. We adjusted a lot during production just to based on what the game was becoming, and what parts were going well in developments, what parts were not going well. So we tried to focus on the things that we where the game told us to go.
Yeah, it was fate.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a question in chat here where they're wondering if you, when you landed on having it as kind of the isometric view, did you know that you wanted it to always be the tilted isometric and then side view in certain spots, or did that also change? And did that change the way that you did your storytelling as well?
We always knew that we wanted to play with the camera. That was from the very first prototype, just because we thought that that could be one of the ways that we could do this a little bit different from other games in the genre. It's also it was one of the ways where we could, because we wanted to make a top-down game, because partially because well, we thought that we could pull that off in terms of production capabilities and so on, but bringing the camera into different angles would allow us to make the world feel a little bit more interesting, a little bit more lifelike than if you only had a static camera. So that was always there.
And then also, it's a good way to show that the art holds up, like what we see on screen now, right? Putting the camera closer to characters and just saying, look, this is what it looks like. Then you can take that with you in your mind when we zoom the camera back out, right? Because the art, does hold a pretty high fidelity, especially considering the distance for the camera. Like we didn't have to do that, but that's just also how it became with with Tor and the art team overall. That they put a lot of love into everything they make, so why not show it?
Yeah, absolutely. Which is definitely a topic I do want to dive into a little bit, because I think if there's one thing that nobody can argue about your game whatsoever, is that it is absolutely stunning. It is. I've actually said this verbatim on other streams before, that this was a work of art, not just a game. It is genuinely so beautiful to look at. And I was wondering if you could dig a little bit more into that. I remember you saying just before this that you have one texture for most of the game.
Yeah, essentially, what we did, like what I did very early on, was that I knew that we needed a lot of content, so we built a pipeline that really allowed us to focus on what was important for the game, which in our case was a lot of content. Not the highest fidelity; it was more important to get the amount there. So we built a pipeline that allowed us to do that, and so all the metal, plastic, etc. objects in the game, mechs, robots, everything are using one single texture and then just shaders. And then same thing with the concrete, only using one texture as well. So essentially what you're looking at here is basically two sets of textures, and that's pretty much the entire game. I think we use something like 40 megs of textures on Xbox for the world, and then the rest is like light maps. But yeah, we use very little textures in general, and that was on purpose, so we could save the budget for other things, but also just speed up the pipeline, because we needed it to be very fast.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, I mean, another thing that looks like it's very important for setting the right mood and atmosphere and all that is the lighting that you went through and set up. How many iterations did it take to find something that you felt good about?
Very few, actually. I think that
We didn't have time to iterate.
Well, I did a bunch of things. Well, basically, I did a bunch of things before our first artist joined, and explored, a little bit what I wanted and stuff. And then we kind of threw that away because our artist, first artist, just made even cooler stuff like from the get go, basically. So we just went with that. So we started with our first environment, and we did a couple of test scenes, and then we just built Cluster 13, which we were just in. And I think actually this was like the second thing we built,
Hmm.
and we did a little bit of iteration, but not that much. We figured out most of this like relatively quickly. Was more other things that we had to iterate on along the way. Because like the models themselves and the art style and the lighting were pretty good pretty early on, actually.
That's awesome. It sounds like it really all just kind of came together from the sounds of it.
Yep.
Yeah. It
Fantastic.
it wasn't easy, but like those things were actually some of the things that we did uh, succeed with really well with from the very beginning.
Hmm. There's a question here from Fluffle Pimp. They're wondering, since emissive neon signs are normally created, will create very noisy reflections and are very expensive to light with, how did you handle that reflection noise and the emissive overhead?
Say, can you repeat that again? I was shooting people.
Basically, how did you handle having so many emissive lights in your world without it bogging down performance or anything like that?
So we actually fought hard to bring out more reflections than what you normally would have, because with a top-down camera you don't get very flattering reflections for the most part. So we actually used and the same thing, like you don't get screen space reflections because there's nothing on screen. So we actually went with reflection probes, and we're basically maxing out the amount of reflection probes at any time. But instead, we lowered them in resolution, so we could afford to have as many as the engine allows. And then instead, we're kind of hand placing them where it looks good. So we're essentially painting the scene with the reflection probes. So we're just placing reflection probes, moving them around. Like, it's not the most accurate. It's just what looks good, because you can't see what's above the camera anyway. So a lot of the nice reflections where you get like lighting in the puddles and stuff like that is just like completely inaccurate, but it looks good. Uh, so we kind of that was one of the big learnings, that we had to make things look good, not accurate.
Hmm. I feel like, especially with an isometric, that's probably sort of a difficult line to toe between accuracy and just what looks good, from the angle that the players are seeing the game in.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. I could sit here and just talk about graphics all day, but I'm going to swerve just a little bit so we can get some questions in from the other developers here as well. um, there is one in here. They were wondering, just in general, what was one of the biggest challenges that you had in development?
Multiplayer.
Wow. Yeah, multiplayer was painful. Um,
Hmm.
Yeah,
that's
I
a
think.
learning for life.
Yeah. No, it's. I think we made a very complex game, in that we have, it's essentially open world. It's also multiplayer. It's also an RPG. It's also multi-platform, cross-platform, local and online co-op. It just does all the things, um, and I think that was just. But multiplayer was the single biggest component. I think uh, that was a problem for us in development in general.
I
Hmm.
think also, just if we talk more creatively, there there are a bunch of features and systems that we opted not to do. Like very often we didn't even start them. Some we started and said, this isn't, we're not vibing on it, we're not feeling it, so let's not do it. But had we had this conversation, year one of development, I would have told you about all these things we're going to put in the game, and it wasn't that we were over ambitious, but I think we just wanted a few too many things. And as the game started to come together, it's like, actually we don't need this. We don't want to clutter, the experience with too many things, too many systems, too many bits and bobs, like hacking, for example, which today in the games you just hold down a button, it goes whoop, and everything in range gets hacked. There was a big thing with hacking, and you would filter and select and do things. I was just like, this is too complicated. This is not in line with the game, with the rest of the game. The rest of the game is pretty fast. It's very reactive. It's very engaging, and the hacking stuff we did just didn't fit with that. So we just scale it back to like the bare necessity. Okay, what's needed? Well, that you can hack something. Okay, let's put that on a button and call it a day.
Good. Yeah.
Because we were gonna do weapon upgrades, paths. There was some light crafting. There was a bunch of stuff, and some we didn't do because it was too much work, because we still needed to ship a game. But a lot of it is like, we don't need it anymore, because something else we took fancy to something else, and doing that meant we couldn't do this, and just that constant debate on what gets to be developed. But a lot of it we didn't need.
I also think we some things we simplified quite a bit because we just needed to get it done, kind of, and then later we realized, like, okay, that was the wrong thing to simplify. We should have kept our original complicated thing. But for the most part it went really well, but then, like, we in some cases we oversimplified instead, which was hard to know until you had the game, basically.
Right. Were any of those things that you ended up fixing after release, or was this all mostly handled before then?
I would say the things that we wish we would have done otherwise, like different, were things that were too big to just bolt on. Like, instead, like, if we went with something that we like, let's not do that, let's take another route, we tried to do it in a way that would be still a valid way, not just like removing it. We replaced it with something simpler, something leaner, and then you can just you can just take it back.
No. I mean, if we were to make this game again for the first time, knowing what we know now, obviously there are things we would have done differently. But there's also things that I think we would have gone even further with, because it was pretty late in development. We was like, oh, this is much cooler than we thought it was going to be. So I wish we had invested more in that earlier, because now it's time to ship. So it was a learning experience for us, making a game in a genre we've never worked in before. Because we and almost everyone in the studio come from first person, third person, but mostly action games, and that's what we brought with us to this camera perspective, right? And I think we kind of underestimated how much work it is and how many things there are to figure out. It's seemingly a simpler game, but it's just as much design challenges, if you will, as with any other game. Because, for example, in FPS, you can do all sorts of shit outside of the camera, right? You can do stuff behind the back of the player. You can't here, 360 vision. But now we have a concept of like outside of screen distance wise. How do we handle that? And how do we handle the fact that people can't see as far as you probably want them to? So sometimes we even zoom the camera out to give you a bit more space. Like, for example, in combat, we need you to have more of the field visible. So it was really, really exciting and fun to do something completely new for us. But we had a fairly strong technical know-how across all disciplines, and Unreal Engine. That's why we're here, right? It's a tremendously powerful tool, and we already knew how to work with it. So that was a very good thing. But we still learned a lot. Like, I am a much better Unreal Engine developer today than I was, 5 years ago when we started Neon Giant.
Yeah, I think that like even if we knew a lot, we also picked a game that is essentially very, very complicated to make. Not just the multiplayer, but it's also the fact that it's like we have open world, very, very, very high density. We have the living world, like we have, like at some points we have like, I don't even know, like 600 plus characters that are in the nearby the player character, and
Wow.
doing that with like 4 player, co-op, and yeah, it's just, even if like we knew quite a bit when we started out, we definitely learned a ton just making this game.
Yeah. It definitely does sound like you found the list of what is the hardest thing to do in game development and then checked off every single one as wishlist items for your own.
Yeah.
As you do. It turned out well, so no
Thank
way
you.
to deny that.
Yeah.
So with multiplayer, did you know always that it was going to be a multiplayer game, or was that a decision made later on?
Fairly early.
Yeah.
The very first idea draft, right? The thing on the napkin, it was single player. And we kind of wanted that to be enough. But then there is the thing called reality, which is people will want multiplayer, right? And we as gamers also want it to be multiplayer. We just don't want to make it. But as we started talking about that concept, it became very clear that this needs to be a cooperative experience. So once we acknowledged that, which was still, I mean, less than half a year in, then
Hmm.
that was the path we were taking.
Sorry, I'm just mesmerized by the scene right now. This is something that I think really stands out about the game is even though it's isometric, it still feels incredibly layered, right? It doesn't feel like you're just on one 2D level and then you have to take an exit
Yeah.
to another 2D level. It feels like a full three-dimensional world still. How did you manage to still land that feeling while keeping true to the isometric nature of just how it was built?
I think is that we always try like to push downwards. So this is a good example. Like so we have an edge here, and then you're pushing downwards. We have a pathway down there, and then we have another layer behind that with the building with the gap between them. So we always try to like just string together different layers of like holes. Like sometimes we have things in the foreground. We're always pushing downwards. Now we have a building that is just close to the camera. So we tried to push that as much as we possibly could.
And
And
on
just
that as well, sorry, quickly, what you did, Tor, was you actually punch holes in the environment, so you don't have to
yeah,
reach an edge to see that. You can see it in the middle.
yeah. So for example, like we have, you have a cover. So instead of just making a cover into a box, we actually made a cover into a hole, so that you can see downwards and things like that. So and same thing, but the game is not fun if you have a screen estate full of like just flat ground, because it's not good for gameplay. It's not good for visuals. So we try to punch holes in it downwards. Instead of just having chest high walls, we had chest high railings around cool sci-fi holes.
Awesome.
And
So
also,
lots
yeah.
of
And
tiny
another thing we did.
little
Oh, another thing we
No,
did
go
as well.
ahead. What were
Like
you
we
saying?
have the characters. We
Mm,
added a lot of characters in the background, so it didn't feel like everyone in the world was just living on this level, and everything else is empty. So
right. Yes, there's always, I noticed, like a ship, or even there, the little drone that was flying overhead. Always
Mhm.
tiny little things going on in the world around it to really make it feel alive. Um, how did how did you manage to do that? Did it just take playing the game a lot and finding the areas that felt like needed a little bit more life, or was that what you handled first and then built from there?
We definitely gradually added this kind of stuff. We
Mm.
started with a few simple things, and then as we were developing the game, we you know had a whole bunch of different things to add life, rotating objects, things flying on splines. We had the characters both in the foreground and in the playable space, and that was
But
just
also be honest, like there's not going to be a game without flying drones if Tor is involved. In the game we're
yeah.
making today, people this week have now gotten to experience a flying stereo in the city. So I was like, yep, I see where this is going. Yep.
Now we don't have a drone mesh yet, so I had to do something. Yeah, but so yeah, we just like had a bunch of different tools to make the scene come alive, and then we just made sure to always add those, uh, to always have multiple moving things at different layers in the scene. Um,
Yeah. Another thing that I feel really made everything come together, because obviously you have this massive, beautiful world that feels lived in and feels used. But I feel like the UI also really integrates well with the feeling. It doesn't feel disruptive. It feels like a natural part of what you would be seeing in an environment like this. So I was wondering if you could tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about the process of building that UI out.
So that's actually, and thank you for that. That's actually one there is where we pulled back a lot as well. It used to be much more stuff, much more information, all kinds of things, especially in the screens in the journal. Um, but I don't want to go as far as to say less is more because there's still plenty. There's still plenty of stuff, but it was very much an iterative process. It's funny because we have a folder on our network in the office with a bunch of really nice screenshots from during development of the game, and in those you can also see what the HUD looked like at that stage. And I have that folder set to rotate as my desktop wallpaper. So like every day there's a new flashback to what the Ascent was. And today I'd say that a lot of those HUDs were horrible, but it's really fun to see because like they went through so many changes. Um, and it could be we completely changed art style. That was pretty early, but we completely changed art style at one point. We reworked a lot of the elements as well. Um, one push we had to do late in development was that we needed to add more information. So, like for example, the ping that Tor uses, where it goes vroom, showing you where to go. It was because like when I talked about we would have done things a bit differently, is that one of the shortcomings of the game, I will admit, is that it can be hard to navigate. It's a bit maze-like at times. So we needed to do a
Mm,
lot to help the player navigate the world, and a good way of doing that is using the UI, right? So the radar came pretty late, the ping came pretty late, um, and that was always based on a need. Not we didn't make any UI because we were dead set on having it because it's cool. Everything came from the need of showing that bit of information, right?
mm,
And this map is pretty cool, and like we tried to keep a somewhat diegetic style, like you say, it's something that makes sense in this world. And we're also not afraid of UI. A lot of games try to well, preferably not have UI at all, right? We don't mind
mm.
UI as long as it fits and helps.
Right. I feel like, especially for a cyberpunk sort of genre, it's a little easier to get away with UI because it feels
Yeah,
like it would make sense, with
yeah,
cybernetics or anything like that. There would
absolutely.
be screens and reticles and things like that.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah. Um, so there's a question in here from chat that I wanna answer before it gets lost. So Yurik Scars is wondering, does the modeling of the scenes have a ton of detail, or is it a good trick with the distance from the camera?
It's a good trick. Uh, I mean, the models have a lot of complexity, like a visual complexity, right? Like, I mean, this is a good example because when we are in a cutscene camera, like a dialogue camera, you can see that the laptop here on the desk, that's not exactly portfolio material for any artist. But from the camera of the game, I'm gonna just time it to a very long dialogue. Do that. Okay. So you see now it just looks detailed, and
Hmm.
that's the trick, right? Like everything is kind of chunky. Uh, and it doesn't actually hold up very well when you zoom in. But whenever we do zoom in, we do try to add a few extra things to make it feel like the game is more detailed than it is. So we have a lot, some extra props on the desk, some extra decals, some extra things, and we abuse depth of field shamelessly. So when you zoom out again, you kind of like, oh yeah, this game is really detailed. I remember when the camera zoomed in, and it's like, nope, it's not. So we do try to trick the eye a little bit with these kind of techniques. Like we put in detail, and then it's more detailed in those areas. Uh,
Mm, absolutely. It works out though. I mean, it could fool me. I was wondering if there was a different like if you popped in different LODs when you zoomed in, or is what we're seeing now the same thing as when it's pulled back in the full isometric view?
it's the same thing, yeah. Because
Very
we didn't
cool.
really. I mean, we have very few LODs because we don't need it so much for rendering. So I removed most of them actually.
Yeah, makes sense. Oh, then you don't have to worry about popping, right? It's all just there. So
Yeah, exactly.
I know Arcade, you mentioned just before about how you swapped the art style. Was that for just the UI or was that for the game as a whole?
No, the UI. So early on, it was much more. So we had a couple of versions, but we had one that was orange, fittingly enough for a Neon Giant. But we changed to red, and red became like the leading color for the game, the key art as well. Very strong red background on with the characters in front, right? So red became a driving theme for us. Another thing we did, which was smaller, but was that like we look at now, we have blue text, green text colors, right? Early on, we really
Mhm.
let's do monochrome. Let's just do the one color. But again, it's like it didn't work as well. People
Oh,
know that green
this is
green
almost
is
like
good, red is bad. Why try
yeah.
why try and don't resist, just go with it.
Reinvent the wheel with colors, so to say.
Yeah.
It ended up it I do love the amount of contrasting colors that you did end up with in the world. I mean, even with you running down this hallway, you've got a really strong red light and then a blue light coming in from the doorway. There's another one, orange light, blue light. Was this a theme that you used through most of the game?
Yeah, pretty much. It's we wanted the game to be quite colorful, so um, we always pushed for like strong colors, strong, like, I mean, the neon, like strong neon colors was always like a guiding motif. So from the very beginning we pushed that, and then we just found different ways of pushing it, and we of course we had to separate areas apart. So we had like the first level, like the tier of the game, which is like down in the sewers, that has a bit different color theme, different style, to the slums that we're in now. And then you go up one level higher to the next tier, and they all have like a slightly different you know palettes and so on, but it's still it's always very colorful, and that was something we really wanted to push on.
Yeah. How did you manage to balance something being bright and colorful and neon while still feeling gritty and the world is literally collapsing around us as we're playing through the game, right? So how did you manage
Mm.
to it's quite the dichotomy. How did you manage to balance that?
Well, there's a lot of trash in this world, and almost nothing is clean either. So we,
I,
yeah,
I think
what are you
also
gonna say?
even sorry, Victor.
Yeah.
No, also with the way we look at this world, which then leads into our tribe. But that is, you know, even though there's lots of horrible stuff, especially this world, which is basically slave world, if you will. You know, the individual people still find joys and entertainment. And, even in the worst situation, people can make jokes, and we kind of want to carry that through. So we don't want to do everything angsty and grimdark and sad and depressing. Same thing with violence. Like obviously, I say obviously because I hope it's obvious. For us, violence in a video game is a spectacle, right? We're not trying to make you feel for these son of bitches that we kill, right? It's supposed to be entertaining, and we try to keep that tone in the writing, but the game as a whole as well. So you see people partying in the distance. You hear people tell jokes. People drink. It's not all doom and gloom. So that also allows us to do a bit more fun stuff in the world, and that goes for locations, themes, signs, activities, all of that stuff.
Right. Speaking of combat, I do want to dive quite in depth on this one as well because you really managed to make a combat that feels adrenaline inducing and impactful. I mean, right there, that was a great example of the sort of melee, um, not quite punch, but when it sends the enemies repelling backwards, the camera shakes for a second and it feels impactful. So, how did you manage to lock down this specific combat style that you have? And especially, there's so many different weapons and all kinds of stuff. I would just really love to learn more about your whole thought process behind building it.
Wow. I mean, a lot of it was keep adding stuff. When it comes to the camera shakes and effects and everything, it's like just add stuff, make it better, make it better.
Yeah,
Don't stop.
and, and I think that was also like, I mean, we relied a lot on our experience, in crafting these type of experiences. Like, but I think it also took a lot of iteration to find, like how fast the game would be, how messy it would be, because we quickly realized that in co-op it gets extremely messy. We can't balance the game to be, you know the right, the same pace in co-op as in single player, for example. So like
Yeah.
we just had to accept, like, if you play 4-player co-op, it's gonna be chaos and mayhem. There's gonna be so many abilities and things firing off. It's not gonna be the same as someone playing in single player. It's just different. So we had to accept that, and we had to tweak things quite a bit to get the feeling right.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, the earlier versions of the game didn't have covers at all. For example, it was much more traditional with player movement and enemy movement stuff. But we're not making Geometry Wars, right? Which is a fantastic game, so nothing bad about it. But that's not what we're making. We had the high-low very early, but that was meant. The intent with that design was initially so that you can choose to shoot over shorter enemies to take out like priority targets further back and stuff. But that was more like when enemies had more of a horde mentality, and they would move as a group, and there was one big guy further back, so you would raise your gun, and that was. And I think this is a bit when I was saying that the game matured, because we greatly reduced the amount of enemies, and we want to bring down the pace as well. Because I think one thing that people react well to with playing this game, now obviously Tor is playing a pretty overpowered character with a machine gun with explosive bullets, but we wanted the action and the actions you, the player, make to be deliberate, not just shooting all over all the time, but actually aiming at someone, choosing who to shoot. And we needed to bring down the pace to do that. And that's kind of also where the covers came in, because that was a good place for you to stay put. You still move around,
Yeah.
you still throw yourself away from danger, you move, you change cover, but it's still a safe place, at least for a second or two. And that was a great way to slow down the pace a bit. Not the amount of bullets, because it's still always action, but less spastic running around everywhere all the time.
And like our kid
And
said, like that it matured, and like as we focused also more, like we got further with the world building, because that was something that changed. Like we pushed that a lot further, and that made it like the balance just shifted, because you had this incredibly frantic combat, and then you had like all this world building, and they didn't quite match. So as we pulled down the speed of things, the game kind of gelled together much more, like the different elements.
Mm, absolutely.
yeah.
Um, what about all the different weapon types in the game? Because there's a ton. Did those just kind of end up coming together over time, or did you make an initial list of these are definitely the
Oh,
weapon types that we want to include, and how did that go?
A bit of both. So early on, we knew some of the archetypes, and some of it is because we think they're fun to use, or cool, whatever. But a lot of it was to cater to different play styles, right? So me personally, as a player, I tend to like precision weapons, slower fire rate, packs more punch. So we have like the chrome puncher and the bore shot, which are basically a bullet and an energy version of a bolt action. So we have that, but some people can't aim for shit, so we give them spray and pray, right? And there are certain archetypes you can't ignore. It's like, if we didn't include shotguns, people would be mad. People want their shotguns. So then, the discussion is more, well, how many barrels should a shotgun have? Well, let's do 5, and let's do a minigun shotgun as well. There you go, shotguns covered. But we
turns out the shotgun
found a
minigun was a bit overpowered.
yeah, but not as overpowered as the rocket launcher minigun. That one went a bit bananas as well. But we made a really efficient pipeline to make new weapons, so we could create new ones really, really quickly. And that is also one of the reasons why we did, right, that we just kept adding them. So that was also a driving factor, because had it been a tremendous amount of work to make a new weapon, of course there would have been fewer. But it's
Mhm.
fun. It's fun to find new ones. Even the ones you don't use, you still appreciate finding them. So it's fun to have a huge gallery of guns.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
also
it
tried our
really is.
best to fill out the gallery, as in like we didn't try to have duplicates of guns that were the same, but
Mhm.
if there was a type of weapon that we didn't have, so for example, I have like a Uzi energy weapon. There's only one of those, but we're like, well, we should definitely have one of those, because why not?
Yeah, absolutely. For things like, the particle effects or the effects when it came to the weapons as well, was that all made in Unreal, or did you use that in other software?
You mean the particle systems themselves? I mean, they're all in Unreal. Uh, and then like textures and so on are not, of course, but everything
Right.
else is like both Cascade and Niagara. So we managed to straddle both, because Niagara was out, but not when we started development. So we have like 50-50. So we have a lot of
Yeah.
duplicate logic to handle both, because we do want to embrace, like we do want to use like all the new things. So We didn't want to just stick
That's
with
us as a
Cascade.
studio.
Yeah.
You know, we always want to use the latest tools, be on the latest version of the engine. You know, we like tech and tools, so we want to use them. We think we're pretty decent at it, so you know that kind of stuff excites us. So when something new is announced, even if we're in development, it's like, well, let's see if we can somehow get that in here, because otherwise we're not going to be able to play with it until next game.
Right. That's really unique. I feel like most of the time I hear instead it's on lockdown.
Yeah.
Please don't add anything new into this. Did that
We're okay. Well, we're not great at locking things down in that sense. That's not fun.
did that present any challenges for you all in development since you were constantly testing out new tools and updating?
Some, not that bad. Like we didn't have any major issues with it. Like we had a few things with like engine upgrades where things shifted around that we had to change. But for the most part, it went pretty well.
Mm.
That's good to hear. It'd be really sad if it was yes, it was horrible and
Yeah, it just got
terrible
worse
and
and worse for every update. I miss Unreal
Unreal
3.
Engine. Ugh. Yeah. So how much of this would you say is coding C++ versus blueprints?
50-50?
I mean,
I mean, there's a lot of blueprints.
well, yeah, I would say like in terms of like just pure logic, like the vast majority is definitely blueprints, just because there's so much, like all like the world stuff, um, like tons of all the living world stuff is blueprints, but then we try to support it with a good core of code. But I think in
Everything on
general, like
top
we're very
is blueprints.
yeah, exactly. Like we have there's a lot of things like they like the significance that manages the logic for like when to turn on and off things. Like all that is code and multi-threaded and very efficient. But then the logic for how the spinning fans work, how we swap animations on the living world characters, like all that is blueprint.
Mm.
So it's a lot of blueprints in this game.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
I heard the sigh when you said
No,
that.
it's good. I mean, we love working with blueprints as well. I mean, the most common reason for something that go from blueprint to code was performance, because
Yeah,
we don't want to have performance to spare, right? So we're trying to push as much of everything as we can. And if there's a big win to be found in moving something to code, that means we can do more stuff somewhere else with blueprints, right? Um,
Mm.
yeah,
so I mean, we had the entire mission system, all the streaming, lots of the online in blueprints as well for a very long time, and then bits and bobs of that was moved to code. It's also much easier to debug code, apparently,
yeah.
according to our programmers. Um, but I mean, we really like creating content with blueprints. It's powerful, it's fun, you can do whatever the heck you want. It's great.
Yeah,
Mm.
I think that we also learned a lot on what things to avoid, and like how to work with blueprints as well. Like 'cause that was a learning experience for our team in general. Um, we definitely learned a lot. There's a lot of blueprints in this that we would not show to people. Um, but yeah, we definitely learned like a lot when it comes to even performance, because I mean, the vast majority of performance improvements were just made on the blueprint level, because that's where the mistakes were. The mistakes were not, of the type that moving them to C++ would fix it. It was just other types of problems. Things with
Right.
overlaps and just turning off, managing tick rates and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for example, you were asking about the UI earlier. The radar we see top right, that was one of the UI element we had to move from UMG to Slate. So coders had to basically translate it because it was too expensive. It was a very expensive piece of UI. So that was something that had to be moved into code. Whereas a lot of the UI is still UMG because that's more designer friendly to work with, right? There were always considerations to make.
Yeah, understandably. There's a question here in chat from Dark Squirrel who's wondering, was there a tech budget from the start, like max draw cells on a scene, max visual effects on screen, or was it just try it, fix it, see what works?
Yeah, try it, fix it, see what works. I mean, it's the reason why we didn't have budgets is because if you have a budget, that means that quite often you're not gonna push the thing to its full potential. So we definitely took several rounds of like we got all the things in, we optimized, we see what is worth it, what is not worth it, we push in more things, what is missing. So we added way more civilians than we had before. Then we had to optimize those. We added more dynamic light. Then we had to optimize those because we did like many iterations of adding more things. And then what we did, for example, when we did a performance, well, basically I just had an Excel sheet with a performance. Like I just ran through all the environments, checked how the performance were. And if we had too much performance, we went and added stuff. We're like, well, we have 10 milliseconds to spare here on console. Turn on more shadows. Spend that performance. So we tried to also spend the performance where we had it. Don't win any award for unused frames. So push in more stuff.
This is true. As a follow-up question to that from Marked at Home, they're wondering if you used any profiling tools.
Yes, we used mainly we used insights for the CPU. For the GPU, we pretty much only used the stat commands in Unreal. Really, it we didn't have. I mean, since we're pretty much using vanilla Unreal on the rendering side, there wasn't a lot of mystery stuff to figure out. There wasn't any big weird things that we introduced. It was just looking at the stats, googling lots of things. I mean, the GPU optimization part of Unreal is extremely well documented. I think, at least for me as an artist. So it was quite easy to just see what was wrong and then just toggle things on and off until you've found the thing and then address it. So insights.
But we
for the
also
CPU.
used our network. Since we know a lot of guys on your end, we would bug them, and Epic, not gonna mention any names, but he's on my T-shirt. He actually told us, like, can you please stop asking our guys on Facebook how to fix things? It's like, but that's where we have them. They answer much faster on Facebook, or Twitter or wherever. And apparently, we also set a record in asking the most questions on the support forums. So there you go.
There you go.
And
Perfect.
we did it all by ourselves.
Yeah. No, but it's like we point being that we don't shy away from asking for help. That would just be silly.
I mean, I get a lot of things just from Twitter. I'm just like, if I can't Google it, if I can't YouTube it, and then I just throw a question out into the void, like, has anyone dealt with this obscure thing in Unreal? And it's like, yep, someone has. Cool, done, fixed it, which is amazing.
Make it easy. Yeah. With that, checking through chat, want to make sure I'm getting their questions in here and I'm not being totally selfish with only asking my own. Reza is wondering how many people worked on this project totally, because we know that it started with the two of you and it grew from there. So what was the end size of the team?
Well, depends on
Well,
how you're
depends
counting.
on how you count.
Yeah. Yeah. We were like, I think we're 12 full-time employees at Neon Giant
Yes.
by the time we shipped. But I mean, we also worked with a lot of partners. We had like, external writers. We had our audio partners, uh, and they scaled up and down depending on needs. So by the end, I think there's more of them in the credits than Neon Giant
Yes.
team members.
Yes.
Um, so in
First is
terms of
Neon
how many,
Giant, and then them.
yeah. So I mean, in total, how many people touched the project? Like, I don't even know. Like, that's probably like 40 people, maybe. But we were never more than 20, including other people like contractors and partners, like on the project at any given time. I think.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Not counting QA and stuff, of course.
Or yeah. I almost made a joke that would anger all QA ever. And you know what? I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna commit. They don't count. It's fine. I'm kidding.
Oof.
All
No.
QA members.
Oh.
I'm kidding. Of course.
No, I'm just
They're
saying,
arguably one of the most
not counting
important
the.
parts of.
Yeah. No, my point was more that since we're such a small studio, we can't have, or can't, but we have chosen not to have a QA department. So today we have one dedicated dev QA with us in the team because that's also something we saw learnings from games, right? So what we're working on now, we have a dedicated QA with us who is, full-fledged Neon Giant as much as anyone else, and it just helps us make a better game, right? But on the Ascent, our publisher handled QA with outsourcing, right? So it was not our cross to bear, really.
It's always I have so much respect for QA. It takes a very special kind of patience to break a game in as many possible ways and document it very thoroughly. So they have my utmost
Yeah,
respect.
I don't know how it looks in other countries, but I was very pleased to find out that there are now QA programs in at uni level to go, because we've had game development schools for quite some time. Like both me and Tor went back in 2005, but that was only what's so-called development, right? But now there's actually QA schools, which I think is great, because I would much rather hire someone with proper training and a passion for that than, well, someone without, right?
Right. For sure. Um, so since we are on the Unreal Engine channel, I think it would be it behooves me a little bit to ask this question, but obviously you had experience with Unreal Engine before, but what was
yes.
that the main driving force for why you ended up choosing Unreal as the engine to build your game in, or was it a different reason?
I mean,
It's the best
we worked with a
engine
ton of
around to
different
work with.
engines. Yeah, I mean, we worked with a ton of different engines, and I mean, for us, it was a no-brainer because of like our experience and the tools involved, and like, yeah, it was just a no-brainer, really.
Yeah.
So
I
we're
mean,
just,
we're big Unreal
the best.
fanboys.
I mean, we're great, so I get it. Um, how did you handle possible networking latency issues for the multiplayer? Did you use um, gameplay, gas, for example, or did you use a different system for that?
Yeah, we used gas, and we do a fair bit of prediction as well to correct. But this was definitely a learning experience as well. So we didn't use gas as much as one could have, I'll admit, but everything with like the special abilities and all that stuff is to a large degree dealt with the gas and the gameplay effects and gameplay cues, etc., to play effects online. So the fact that I was there was a real boon for us. It was, I'll be honest, it was difficult for us to get started with that. We couldn't quite find. There wasn't a lot of info out there beside the official stuff. Like when you look at blueprints, there are myriads of YouTubes and guides and all of that stuff, but people aren't talking about gases as much. So it was harder to find information, which meant that we actually had to learn for real. That's a pain. It's much easier when someone else has figured it out and we just do that.
And I also think, like, I mean, we're also peer to peer, which was also a challenge. So we had to, that was also a challenge, just managing that load on like the server, like whoever was the host. So we did have to pick a little bit, like when it came to replication, because we have so much stuff in the living world with all the character movement and so on. So it was definitely a uh, big factor in just like trying to just optimize that, because that was heavy.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Still on the theme of multiplayer, I know you said that there was a point where you just kind of accepted that combat was going to be chaotic with 4 players in it, but were there
Mhm.
any extra steps of balancing that you had to go through with multiplayer as a consideration?
Oh, absolutely. We scale a bunch of stuff depending on the amount of players. We scale the amount of enemies. We scale their numbers. Um, so there's a bunch of stuff under the hood to try and make for the best experience. Because if you were just to pop down 3 additional players into our single player game here, you would just cut through them, in a second. So we needed to up their time to kill. We needed to bring in a few more enemies where budget allows. So that was also a budget concern, right? How many can we actually have? So that's definitely something we had to look at, and we uh, we paid way more. I'm not gonna say respect, but we gave more love to 2 players and 4 players than 3 players, because 4 players needs something completely different. 2 can still be a somewhat organized affair, right? And 3 is just the awkward one in the middle that got the numbers in between.
The middle child, it
Yeah,
always.
pretty much.
Were there any particular challenges that you can remember when it came to balancing? Like any extraordinary bugs that happened or things like that?
I mean, we patched the game to make the last fight easier, because that one was just ridiculously difficult. But it was hard because
Yeah.
we don't know what abilities or weapons people will be using, right? So it was very hard to balance as a whole. And obviously, we are pretty decent at the game, so we need fresh eyes to actually be able to gauge the challenge, right? And
Yeah.
we did that as much as we could with playtests and stuff, but it's definitely tricky. Definitely tricky.
Yeah, it's also like, I mean, when the game launched, we added a harder difficulty, and then I just see someone just breeze through the hardest difficulty in his first playthrough, and I'm like, internet. It's like, you're so much better at games than me. And we
And
had a
also,
bug where, yeah, we had this bug with the spawning, like, bosses. You could spawn multiple bosses if you ran back and
oh
forth,
yeah,
which we patched. So there were people like who just like basically speed run to get like the most powerful weapon in the game, which we also had to patch. And I saw a guy that was like managed to spawn like 10 heavy mechs in one place, and then he just melted through them in like 30 seconds with like the right combination of abilities and the most powerful weapon. And I mean, that's pretty fucking awesome, I think, and that was really cool. And like, that is not intended at all, and it's totally overpowered. But it's really cool that someone found it.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. What was that like once it released and just seeing kind of the community response to the game and speedrunners and all of that? How did that feel once it was finally released?
I mean, great feedback is great. Mean people are mean, but it's fun to see people engaging with something you've spent years of toil and love on, right? So it's really great just seeing, like we were watching streams and stuff, from day one, just all the time, and it was so much fun to see how people play the game because there there are like combinations of gear and abilities, for example, that we didn't really think were that useful, but seeing them used in a particular way or in a particular scenario is like, holy, okay, that's really cool. And the fact, like the game is more successful than we thought when we started working on it, right? That became this huge. It's very humbling, and it's a great feeling. And we couldn't even keep up with it all. It was so much engagement, but it was fun. It was really really great experience.
Awesome. Glad to hear that. It always warms my heart when it goes out and it's well received and, feels like years of hard work paying off in the end, right?
Yeah, it's also very good for the ego because obviously we no, but obviously we love our audience and we love that people play games, but we got a lot of really positive comments from other developers. It could be studios emailing us, just saying, fantastic, like how did you guys do this, and all of that kind of stuff. That among peers really elevates you to feel yes, it was worth it, and that people that know the craft respect what we managed to create. That feels really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to do a little bit of shameless promo on, how it ended up doing, but you ended up selling over 1 million copies, right?
Yes,
Correct.
that's right.
Right. And I remember seeing something about a nomination for an award. Uh, how about all of that
Yeah, so
stuff
we
too?
we, we won a few. Were nominated in way more. Really good. Won best indie of the year at was it Fextra Life? We're nominated
Nominated
in
best action
one.
game in Dice Awards, which was really
So,
cool.
and that's also like
Uh,
just to be nominated in the same category as games like Halo and Deathloop and stuff is like that's good company to be, and I am perfectly happy not winning against those behemoths. But
well,
it's
I mean,
just
you're a bit
amazing to be
happy.
met.
Even
But
happy.
it's just amazing to be mentioned in the same sentence as
Yeah.
those super 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 successful games.
Did you ever imagine that it would? I mean, obviously you're hoping for it because you're putting in all this time and effort and making it as good as you can, but were you expecting it to, be nominated for all these awards and do as well as it did?
Of course.
Not. I
Of
would say. I
course.
would say like I mean we knew like some of the potential that the game had, but it's also uh, since we're such a small team, and I mean it's very personal. Like everyone put a lot into this game, um, so you kind of like you hope that people will just get the vibe. It's like we we knew like we will never make something that is the biggest, the most polished, but we hope that people will see that it has a lot of heart in it, and you're never sure how much that will come through. Like when you people play the game and you have the entire thing, you have the sound is finally working, the soundtrack is there, like everything's balanced. Like will people actually respond to the experience, and was your gut feeling right? And that's always a question mark. I think that was what surprised me. Like we knew that the game was like yeah, this it's fun to play through the game, shoot a bunch of dudes, but we were not sure if people would feel like how much they would appreciate the world and the world building and the graphics. Like
Yeah.
we were not expecting to be nominated for graphics of the year, like, and not for people to make hour long videos on YouTube about the world. Like so, that was extremely humbling and very 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 fun.
Yeah. Was obviously, you've both been in the industry for a while before you even worked on this. So, how was the experience different? Making your own game and realizing your own vision versus working on the other games before.
Do you want to start, Tor?
Sure. I mean, it was extremely fun because I think one of the things, like, I mean, both me and Arcade, but I can speak for myself a little bit more. But I really enjoy learning new things and just getting my hands dirty with, like, digging into all the parts of the tools and the engine and everything. So doing like something like this is pretty much, well, you have to dig into everything, absolutely everything.
Mm.
And that was great fun. Like I get to learn things like basically every day, and I still do with a new game. And I think there's no such thing as routine, and that's really really fun for me.
Yeah, I think the biggest, or at least one of the biggest differences in making this game compared to every single game I worked on in my entire career is this. This is the first time, and I've said this in other interviews as well, and it always sounds so cliche, but I'll say it anyway. This is the first time I worked in a game where find the fun has actually been the process. Because when you're working with over 100 people, sometimes 500 people on a game, there's a plan. It's laid out. This is what we're doing. There are people in a different country now shooting cutscenes. This is happening over there. This is what we need to make because we all agreed, and it's hundreds of millions of dollars in budgets, and it's a big ship, right? And it's moving this way. What we could do, being small and being agile, if you will, is that we could actually make changes during development when we noticed that we were really vibing with something. So there are features in the game that came out of nowhere that we said, what, this is really cool, this is really fun. Let's put more emphasis on that. Like what we talked about earlier, right? With the RPG part grew, other parts shrank. This really was a journey where the development went like this and just kind of figured out to what we thought was the best decision in that moment instead of what we decided 3 months ago. And this is the first game where I've actually seen that happen, and that for me was definitely a much more fun way to make games than sticking to the plan that was made 3 years ago.
Right. Well, with this being the, kind of the baby of Neon Giant, the first one, really. I have a couple of sort of rapid fire questions for you here, and it's just some of your favorite parts of it. So first, what is your favorite feature or tool of the game?
Stasis.
Yeah, stasis and overcharge, easy. And
Yeah.
that's one of the features
Okay.
I was alluding to with that it just came, I don't know, it came from a special effect that was really cool and turned into core of the combat loop.
Let's see if I can.
Yeah.
Here we go. This one. Rip.
So you,
That was
Oh,
just
you, you
supposed to be an
put
so
effect.
enemies
brutal.
into stasis, and then you overcharge them with damage, and then they explode, killing more dudes.
Yeah, and then that might in turn spread. Sometimes you have a chain reaction with, like, 10 people exploding into giant blue balls, and it's just amazing and super fun. And that was completely just came from, like, this is cool, we should do something more with it, and then it just ended up being a huge part of the combat loop, like our kid said.
Mm.
And also, funnily enough, with that, so there are many different ways of putting enemies into this blue stasis mode, right? What he used now was a grenade, which is a spectacle in itself, and that grenade came from a sound effect. One of the sound guys sent an effect he made for something completely different that wasn't used. They were like, "That's an awesome sound. We need to put that on something. What does it sound like?" Well, it sounds like a sci-fi explosion to us, and that's where that grenade came from, which also is a weird way of coming up with features. But we were excited by that sound, and we made the grenade, and then they changed to a different sound that was even better. But it still came from that original sound effect somewhere.
Right. Man, it is. Stasis is truly brutal. It's probably one of the most brutal things in the game, in my opinion. And there's a few, but it's so good.
It's
All
fun.
right, so next favorite follow-up. What is your favorite environment, prop, or just 3D model of the game?
Yeah, Arcade, you get to answer this one.
The taco truck.
Taco truck. Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, because we had a taco truck outside the office. That was great. Unfortunately, we were two good customers, so now he's actually opened a restaurant and the truck is gone. And the
Oh
restaurant is
no!
far
Yeah.
further away, so we don't eat there as much. But that was the
Yeah.
inspiration for, you know what? We need tacos in our game. We need a taco truck.
There you go.
Yeah,
This taco truck?
I wrote
Yeah,
all his
because
dialogue.
yeah. I mean, because I could see it from my desk, so we would just go like, oh, there's no queue in the taco truck, and then we just all go down. Can't do that now. He's too successful. He's
Yeah,
too good for us.
Yeah, I got a
single-handedly.
concussion from that taco truck once because the window thing flew from the window and hit me in the head. Didn't even get a free taco.
This is, this is unacceptable. Can't believe it. No free
Yeah,
taco.
I
you're getting the scoop.
yeah. Yeah, I don't have a favorite model in the game because I made so many. So I don't know. I don't
It's
have a
like picking
favorite.
your favorite child. You can't, can't do it.
No, it's more that I mean, I built the game, like I built the world, like I tried to build a world, so I didn't go like, oh, this model is amazing. Didn't really have that luxury, so
Mm,
um, I think like the game looks good. I think there's cool stuff. I just don't have a favorite.
fair. How about level? Is there like just a particular scene or level that you like spending a little bit more time in over others?
I think Stimtown is really cool, which is the second hub world you get to go to, which is more like of a hedonistic, happy place than Cluster 13. That's a really nice space.
I think like the central shaft in general of this arcology. So like it's the first place you see when you go up from the sewers after the intro. I think that I'm really happy with how that came out. But it's also like our team did such an amazing job. Like the entire world is built by like two guys, and I mean there's so many amazing parts of it. So like yeah, it's it's too even, and I can't pick a favorite.
That's why I'm here. Ask the hard questions. What about favorite animation or enemy in the game?
Favorite enemy
I
is
mean,
the
I like Papa
quiche.
Farrell.
The model or the enemy? 'Cause
Well, the enemy, but it wouldn't be what it is without the model, right? And there's some fun stuff with how he was made and things as well. So he holds a special place. We had the small ferals, and then we needed to make a big one. And just as a developer name, we started calling it Papa Feral, right? And we were totally gonna change that, and we did. But nobody liked the real name. So it's like, nah, let's just stick with Papa Feral. It has a nice ring to it.
yeah, I like the quiche. Uh, they're jumping around. Uh, they were. I mean, I think that was one of the first times when the game started playing better when we added those.
Mm,
I think,
yeah,
and then we just gave everything leap because it was
yeah.
good.
How about favorite weapon type? Since there's so many, I gotta know which one is at the top of the list.
I mean, for me, it's still the bore shot, the bolt action like weapon. Just packs a punch, pierces enemies, sounds great, plays great if you can aim. It's just really cool. That's the one. There we go.
Oh wait, sorry.
You don't have it equipped.
Yeah, I know. Just swapped. Car lens, they're so short. Yeah, I mean, it's good. I'm also a sucker for bolt action rifles. Like, I mean, you can't go wrong with a good bolt action. But I think the Overwhelmer that I was playing with is also like, it's just hilarious because it's a explosive automatic rifle.
That's fair. I feel like it's hard to go wrong with something like that. So the taco truck was a perfect example, but are there any other fun Easter eggs that you have kind of placed throughout the game that players might not know about or see at first glance?
I mean, there's a bunch of references to different sci-fi work all over.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a
The,
myriad of puns, so many puns.
yes. We are very guilty when it comes to puns. Yeah, I mean, there's tons of like, for example, the first chapter is called Arcology Blues, which is both a reference to Cowboy Bebop, where the first episode is called Asteroid Blues, and the first chapter of Neuromancer, which is called Shiba City Blues. So it's a double reference. Oh, and also the intro has the same word count as the intro to Blade Runner. Also completely by accident.
Same timing of the shots and everything. So that's really cool. We saw a streamer, don't remember who to be honest, who found a pair of pants in the game, and it's like, oh, this is a really cool cyberpunk. And it's like bike sore. It's like, no, it's just byxor, which is Swedish for pants.
Yeah, Arcade had to name the items something.
That's amazing.
So, it's like there's a submachine gun that has piercing bullets, so it's called Brosnan.
Pierce Brosnan.
Oh no.
So there's a ton of stuff like that.
All right, stream is over.
Yeah.
This is this is unacceptable.
We have the frag grenade, and then we have the frag, and then we have the frag more, and then the biggest one, which is frag most.
Yeah.
We're horrible with names.
Yeah, maybe we can do better now with ChatGPT or something.
Oh god. Is that better or is that worse? Depending. I don't know.
Depends on what it spits out.
So, were there any notable bugs that really distinctly just live rent-free in your brain?
Quite a few.
Well,
that's development for you. Oh, now he's pausing. Well, okay, now we're serious.
Yeah, I just realized that because I never fixed it, and it's because we have a pool party with like naked people. Well, not naked people; they have underwear. The problem is that for some reason the female bodies never spawned, and we couldn't figure out why, and they still don't. So yeah, so they're just not there. So sometimes you can see a floating head where it could pick the correct head, but it just would refuse to use the swimsuit female body. So yeah, so sometimes in some places you can see floating head, and that's why. And I tried to fix that bug many times, and it doesn't make any sense.
I think that one deserves to stay. I like the idea of a floating head pool party. How about you, Arcade? Do you have any notable bugs that you wish you could forget but you can't?
I mean, we had this really annoying issue that when you every time you close the journal, your gear and color and all appearance would get randomized. So like you put a lot of effort into choosing your favorite colors and your gear and stuff, and then like the character just changed several times while playing, and it was just it's only visuals, but it was really frustrating. It was really really frustrating. I don't even remember what the reason was, but I guess it had to do with NPCs or something. I don't know, but that one was pretty annoying. We had enemies not being able to take damage. That one sucked. Glad we fixed that.
Yeah, I could see that
Yeah,
one
like
being
I
a
said,
problem.
that's game development.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Were there any bugs that ended up sticking around as either features or you figured, it's fine, it can stay?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, we definitely have bugs that we know of that have stayed in the game, but those
Sure.
are not that exciting.
Yeah, no, I can't think of it. When we made a Christmas pack, a free
Oh yeah.
DLC, we we were gonna do a stag head helmet. So Tor prepped that for me because I'm the one who set up armors and weapons and all the stuff, and he priced me assets. And he says like it's done now. It's on the server. So I made a helmet, and I found a mesh called stag or deer or whatever, and I used that. But apparently that was the entire animal. So your helmet, you basically turned into a stag centaur creature because you could run around with it, and that was I thought I should stay. It didn't, but I thought that was pretty
Oh.
awesome.
Well, we also have like the bug that when you put on the Christmas items, you have a snow effect. So it starts snowing if you wear the Christmas hats. But if you play co-op, you get one snow effect per Christmas hat. So if everyone wears Christmas gear, there's a lot of snow, and
You
that
have
got to
Christmas gear
stay.
in your inventory, right?
Yeah, I do. There we go.
Yeah, so that was the whole. That I accidentally used the whole body, and now
I'm
it's
a little
snowing.
sad. I'm a little sad that didn't stay, but
Yeah, me too.
Oh yeah, there's another one that you can use the mech suit. So you wear like a giant mech suit, so you become enormous. But if you enter a cutscene wearing the mech suit will stay on for the entire cutscene, and that was also a bug. But we let that one stay as well because it just looks
Yeah, because it's
hilarious.
really awesome.
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like this is amazing seeing the cutscenes with the the stag head helmet.
I think that's one of the things we were, that we decided early on was that we made sure that in every cutscene, all the co-op players are actually in the cutscene with their gear. So every cutscene
Yeah.
is made to support 4 players.
Yeah.
That's awesome. As in, each character has like their own specific place doing their own thing, or
Yes.
just that.
Yeah. So every cutscene has 4 vacant slots that we fill with the playable characters. Because it's really annoying in co-op when you're player 2 and you're just kind of like an appendix and you don't get any screen time, you don't get to be part of the story. But here, like, they're always moving as a unit. So if the 3 of us were to play the game, it would be our 3 characters with our own character customization in the shots. Because it's just silly that they wouldn't be. It was more work, of course, but I think it turned out really, really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it does break me as the perpetual player too, and everything I ever do. It is a little immersion breaking to just kind of see my character either standing completely still in the background, just like, oh, well, there's all this action and I'm gonna just hang out, I guess. Or my favorite is T-posing. Those are the top tier ones.
Yep.
So that's a great little detail, being able to have each player feel like they have a role to play in each cutscene.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pull in a couple extra questions from chat here for a moment. But speaking of inventory, there is a question about how you handled your inventory system and how you built that out.
Not sure what part we're curious about, but it's basically just a list, and we create items when they're needed. Um, it's a fairly simple system actually. Also, another example of something that started as blueprints and moved into code to better be able to manage the assets and links needed for that whole thing to work. And yeah, I'm not really sure what to answer. That's insightful.
Did you use Asset Manager for any part of building out the
We
No,
did
game?
not.
we we didn't.
That's the shortest answer.
Yep, just no. All right, if you say so. Making, like I said, just going through, making sure I'm pulling some good ones here. There is a question about if you used any procedural modeling for any part of the game.
Yes, we used it for a bunch of things. So we had, for example, like neon signs and the decals. Those are using um, Houdini to generate those inside the editor, so we could type out, words and things like that. So we did a bunch of that for to speed up the process, and also to help with the world building, because that's often the thing that gets neglected and it's very hard to do, because it kind of takes you out of the process of building the world. You have to go to a 3D application, you have to make that model, you have to unwrap it, send it back. So it was just allowed the artist to do a lot of more things just inside the editor and really quickly.
Hmm. Let's see. Another question here from Vinny Guerrero is wondering, how did you put an ending to the project? Like avoiding feature creep, and how did you know that, all right, it's done, and we're not going to touch it. It's time to let it be free.
We ran out of money.
Also, we told
No,
people that
but
we are gonna ship at the date, and then we did.
didn't. No, but I
Well, the
mean,
second time.
yeah, no. So we did extend the development because we like as is always right, but the longer you work on it, the more done it gets, and the more you start to find with this. And we just saw that with some extra time, we can make the game much better. And like if you were to play the game that it was half a year before we shipped, it's a completely much worse experience because that's when we really started to find it, right? So we really like the speed of which we got things done that last half a year is I will say it was impressive. We had a really high velocity of just getting stuff into the game and making them better. Um, but there was a reality, right? And there is a cost. So we needed to ship a game eventually, right? And that's also something, as I was saying earlier, like we're very pragmatic. So we we're pretty good at having those insights of looking at reality and the project saying we need to get this out this summer. How working backwards from that, where do we set what deadlines, etc. And then it's a collaboration with the publisher and stuff. Um, but yeah, it was hard work. That's how we get it done.
Yeah, there's no easy make game button, unfortunately, yet. Maybe one day, but for now.
Yeah.
What is one tip? This would be for each of you, I suppose. What's one tip you learned during this project's development that you would like for other devs to know?
You get to do a
Hmm.
non-performance related one, Arcade, because I have a lot of performance
Mm-hmm.
related ones.
Oh, it's a
No,
good
I can start.
question. So I want to.
Yeah, so I can start. It's like one of the things that we spent a lot of time on was to get performance right and to make the game work with open world and so on. And something that we have done now that we were a bit hesitant to do before was just like to change a whole bunch of the defaults and the settings in Unreal to suit your project, because there's a lot of things in there that are turned on by default, uh, that most projects don't need, perhaps, depending on what you're doing. So we didn't know how many of those, so it's very worth going over the engine and the project settings and everything in there and making sure, like, what does it do we need it right now? Then, if not, then turn it off. And even, like, going into the defaults, we for example, we had to turn off, like, overlaps is defaulting to true. So when you stream things in, you get a hitch. So we just had to manage that, for example. And all of this could have been, avoided if we would just have taken a good hard look at the default settings and making sure that, like, what we have is, what we need right now. That's a big one.
Yeah. I think that this is a bit more philosophical, but don't overcomplicate it. Thinking mainly about blueprints, for example, it's going to end up complicated in the end. And the way, if you keep working on it, but don't start at that end, just get it done instead. Get something done, get stuff into the game, so that you can evaluate it. It's often, I find, very hard to know exactly what you want before starting. So with that, it can be pretty dangerous to try and build something that's too smart, because very often, like even in games much bigger than like scale, bigger than the Ascent, people have a tendency to overcomplicate during development, and then it's a painful realization when you see that that wasn't actually necessary or maybe not worth it. Our civilians in the Ascent, for example, are actually very simple, but they do their job brilliantly, and they get scared and they knock physics things over and all that. You often don't need as many bells and whistles as you might initially think. So just be mindful of that and be a bit more pragmatic in your implementation approach.
All very good advice, I would say. So we're coming up towards the end of the time here. I don't want to keep y'all for the rest of the day as much as I would love to. So, a couple final
Yay!
questions. uh, well, for rest of what time is it for y'all right now? Actually, I'm curious.
It's a quarter to 9 in the
9
evening.
p.m.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So yeah, I think I don't want to take up the rest of your night and not let you get some well-deserved rest. So, a couple last questions I have for you. One, obviously, The Ascent was a huge success and has garnered quite a few fans of your work. Is there anything that we can look forward to coming from y'all in the future?
Well, another game. We are in development of a really cool new project. And I'll steal a minute here and just mention that we are hiring for that project. So we're looking for talented developers. They can visit jobs.neongiant.se and see our open positions. Because what we're doing now is ludicrously ambitious, very cool, very exciting. We're moving into FPS. We're still in cyberpunk sci-fi, and it's gonna be pretty damn cool.
Very, very exciting.
Okay.
It looks like you had something you wanted to say, Tor. I didn't want to interrupt.
No, I'm sorry, but I actually do have to go
Oh,
as
perfect.
well.
Perfect
So,
timing.
yeah. So yeah.
All right. So yeah. Well, thank you both so much for coming onto the show today. Really appreciate you taking the time to walk through the game and answer some questions for us. So I will all speed through this so we can get you to where you need to go. But also thank you so much, everybody who watched. If you want to play the game, we have the link available in the description as well as on the main announcement for this. So you can go get it for yourself and give it a try, as well as you can find the link for where they're hiring if you're interested in trying to join Neon Giants team here. And with that, I won't go on too much longer. If you missed any part of the stream, you can see it in video. We post it on both our Twitch and YouTube channels at Unreal Engine. Come follow us on socials at Unreal Engine, and come join the forums where you can get all the latest news as well as all the links associated with today's stream. Probably the fastest I've ever done that. But
Awesome.
everyone, have a fantastic rest of your day. There's no streams next week because it's GDC. Yay! So if you're going there, make sure you come say hi at the Epic Games booth. But other than that, I'll see the rest of y'all in 2 weeks when we're back from that. So thank you all so much again for coming on the show today. And
Oh,
yeah.
it was great.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you for having us.
Yeah, of course. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.